Alright, everybody. So there has been a few more updates or happenings in regard to this whole debate about whether or not Muslims and Christians worship the same God. And seeing as I had just made a video on it last week, I figured I might as well go ahead and make a second video on some of the updates and some of the more notable things that have happened. I didn't want to at first, but then a few things were said, and I was realizing maybe this is more important than I think, and I do need to go ahead and provide an update here. So I have some few clips I want to show you guys. The last clip is probably my favorite and actually has nothing to do with any drama. It's just somebody's input. We'll see later who that is. And I just really want to get into this, express my thoughts, hear you guys' comments, because this is kind of getting out of hand, and honestly, I really hope that this is the end of this entire saga among Christian YouTube, and that we can put this aside and get back to what's really important. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get to this first clip. I do want to warn you guys, I'm going to go start it off hot with probably the biggest talk of the town in regards to this whole conversation right now. It's going to be another clip from Trent Doherty, who we saw had a bit of a crash out in the debate last week, and he kind of had another one this week. And so there is a lot of language in this clip. So if that's something that offends you, you may want to turn it down or skip past this. But we're going to get to that first clip right now. All right, so for some context, they're going over this verse on the screen, the very popular verse. I'm sure you guys know it. And they were discussing it, and there was something said, which I'm going to show, that really set off this conversation as something very negative. And so just bear with me and bear through the language if you're going to stick to it, and let's just get into it, and we'll talk about it a little bit after.
So, where does this type of willful rejection of the one true God, that you can only worship God in one specific, like if you're not worshiping the true God, you're worshiping a demon. So, what happens when you worship these demons? Well, guess what? God gives you over to sexual impurity. And I think we can actually see the fruits of this type of theology on display here today, since you have teamed up with a bisexual atheist to defend your theology.
That's
And
a
I
piece
see
of
my time.
shit. That's a piece of shit move, you fucking piece of shit. Fuck you. That
I'm
is
just
so
saying.
disgusting. I cannot believe that I'm sitting here and I am seeing somebody who claims to be a Christian treat another human being with such absolute disrespect. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself. Danny
Well,
is a
you're
friend
coming
of
here
mine.
to
You are so
defend
disgusting.
theology
That is
with
the
an
most
atheist
unchristian,
that has his
self-black. You're
entire
disgusting.
and
You're
now he's crashing
disgusting.
out.
God have
And now he's crashing out.
mercy on your soul.
Well,
God have mercy
Okay,
on your
and
soul.
now he's crashing
What
out.
a
Okay.
bullshit move.
Well, we can piety signal and all of this type of
What a
stuff,
bullshit
but
move.
I think that is the fruit of your theology. Ultimately, at the end
let's
of the
go
day.
back to let's
Pussy.
go back to your verse. The verse, I agree with Trent. That verse undermines your whole point. The people that were given over, do they know God? Yes or no?
Now, I'm going to go and pause it there, but I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit so you can see right about here.
Then when they're talking about
Well,
God, they're referring to the God
they know that Jesus.
Trent leaves the call. So, what are my thoughts on this? This is not going to be as anti-Trent as you may think. I do believe that, let me put this back up here. I do believe that Trent was 100% in the wrong by crashing out like that. That is ridiculous. That is very loud. And what's interesting is that obviously the person here that Trent is teaming up with in this 2v2 debate is a guy named Danny, and he is a bisexual atheist. That's what you can see under his name tag. He put that there. So he is a bisexual atheist. So whenever Cleve says this to Trent, says that the fruits of his theology is doing things like teaming up with bisexual atheists. What's interesting is that Danny doesn't really get offended or upset by that. He's just like, yeah, he is. But Trent gets really mad. And here's the problem. Yes, Cleve was absolutely throwing a jab and a shot. And the problem is I have both double feelings on this. If he was doing it just to get a reaction out of Trent, then it was not okay at all. If he was doing it to prove a point about his theology, which I think he was to some extent, then yes, I absolutely agree with him. I do think that when we go into a deep rabbit hole and saying things like Muslims and Christians worship the same God, it can lead to some conclusions where you are proving this verse right. And I don't know that I 100% disagree with him on that. I do think that there's a part of him that was doing it to try and get a reaction off of Trent based of what Trent had acted like in the previous debate in crashing out against Jay Dyer and Father Deacon Ananias. I do absolutely believe that's that he was trying to do that, and I don't even think he would deny that. It was absolutely insane for Trent to act out like that. Like, don't get me wrong, insane. Throwing up the bird, repeatedly saying F you, calling him different names. Yeah, that's insane. And that is absolutely not okay. And he crashed out again. That's 2 debates now in the past, 2 weeks? Week that he's crashed out a lot in. Yeah, that's insane. And I don't want to dwell on that too much because I'm going to let these clips kind of speak for themselves. I know I didn't now just do that, but I kind of want to more because so much content's been made out of this. I just felt like I should make an update on it, essentially. So let's go ahead and get on to the next clip. All right, so this clip's further on into the debate, and there's just something said here that I wanted to talk about real quick.
You're saying that you're committed to this, that if Muslims are worshiping a different entity, okay, then it would be like a pagan worshiping Zeus, because Allah would be a different entity than the one true God.
Sure, because they willfully reject Jesus Christ.
Right. But then earlier you said Muslims, you agreed with me that Muslims believe or know God.
Well, sure, they know because they know that Christians worship Jesus as God.
Right. So they're not like the pagan. They actually are bowing down to the one true God.
Sure, they're not like the pagan.
Sure, okay.
Actually, I would have.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop it there. So I think Cleve was saying sure to the fact that Muslims know the one true God, not that they are bowing down to him. And what's interesting here is that the point trying to be made by Danny, I actually feel like him reinforcing this fact of the distinction between the pagans and the Muslims actually does more damage against his position than it does anybody else's. The reason being because you can argue if the Muslims know the one true God, as in they knowingly accept what they are rejecting, as in they know they are rejecting the Trinity and Jesus Christ as God, then they do not have any room to claim ignorance, whereas the pagans had room to claim ignorance. That's why using that verse where Paul is talking to the pagans about the unknown God and comparing it to the Muslims, it just doesn't work, because in one instance the pagans, they had no knowledge of the one true God, whereas the Muslims do have that knowledge and they just knowingly reject it. So you can't really say that they know God in the sense that they worship him, but they do know and reject God in the sense that they knowingly reject the Trinity and Jesus Christ as God. So the two really can't be compared, and I think that's why that's kind of one of the crux of this entire debate, not just in this single debate, but in all the debates, is that this analogy or this comparison just doesn't work, but it's been used over and over and over again. And we can see from that example that it just doesn't work. I just smacked my mic. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. But yeah, I don't understand why this keeps getting brought up, because it's just not the same. It just isn't at all. And I don't understand why people think that it is. One is ignorant and one is not. I talked about this in my last video, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it here, but let's go ahead and go into the next clip. All right, so this clip's a bit different. This is actually the debate that has had before, if I'm not mistaken, before that Cleave to Antiquity debate. I went out of order, that's my bad. This debate between Orthodox Christian, apostate prophet, newly converted, and then you have Trent Doherty, obviously Catholic, on the same exact topic between these two now, except it was essentially a 2v1 in some spots because Cameron from Capturing Christianity has... Sorry, I was thinking about how the fact people are making fun of him and calling him Capturing Islam now because of all of this, but he's a recent Catholic convert. I think last year he converted, so now obviously he was on Trent's side, and a lot of times there was a 2v1, and it was kind of embarrassing seeing he was supposed to be a moderator, but I'm not going to get into that any further. But this was a very weird thing that Trent Doherty said, so let's get into it real quick.
I think the same thing is true of Jews. I think that Christians and Jews worship the same God. And I don't think anything soteriological follows from that either. You could be like a replacement theorist, like a reformed replacement theorist, and said Jews are all going to hell by default. You could be kind of a eternal covenant guy like me that says all Jews are going to heaven by default, or you could be a person that says it just depends. Nothing soteriological follows from Jews and Christians worshiping the same God.
Okay, so that's pretty rough. Saying that Jews and Christians do not do worship the same God. I would already that is as Apostate Prophet says later on, Ridvan says later on, that is a more difficult discussion. I would still say that no, in modern times, Jews and Christians do not worship the same God because they also willingly reject and knowingly reject Jesus Christ as God, among a lot of other Christian things. However, theirs is more complicated, as Ridvan states, because of the history of them both being an Abrahamic faith, whereas Islam really isn't. It kind of is, but it also isn't. Is the Islamic and like Muslim history in relation to the Abrahamic God is a lot more confusing. There's debates all over about whether or not they should be considered in Abrahamic faith or not. But the bottom line is that Jewish is much more confusing. But what I think is crazy is saying that he's the eternal covenant guy, which means that all Jews are saved. These are the same Jews that some of them have written things and have some documents. I did not find them. I completely forgot before, but saying things that like Jesus Christ is a demon and such. This is not a brush it off like, oh, that was just a one-off thing. No, I think that we need to realize here is that statements like that and other theological points, talking points, are starting to get revealed now because of this debate. And we have to be careful about our theology because I think this is a very good example of how accepting one proposition is true or positing one doctrine or proposition is true in regards to theology has a butterfly effect on lots of other effects of theology. This belief could affect a lot. It's this case, it's affecting what Trent's view of salvation is. Anyways, that's all for this clip. I'm gonna move on to the next. I don't want to be yapping for too long.
There's lots of I'm saying that Muslims do know God, so they don't fall under this verse, and many Muslims do obey the gospel.
No single Muslim obeys the gospel of Christ. No single God actually knows.
Sure, they do.
The Trinity.
Sure, they do. It doesn't matter.
Okay, that is absolutely insane. I will say that that is insane to me. In a lot of ways, that's more insane than saying that all Jews are saved by default. No, Muslims do not accept the gospel. That is insane. Maybe an ex-Muslim, if you're implying the ex-Muslims do, yeah, sometimes ex-Muslim will leave Islam and then come to Christianity, accept the gospel. Absolutely. But no, they do not accept the gospel. That is insane. And doubling down on it. And then he's laughing because Ridvan's laughing because he's like, there's no way he just said that. That is an insane thing to say. No, Muslims do not accept the gospel. I don't even think I need to reiterate on that. That was one of the more memorable clips of this that people were sharing. Like, again, this is what that butterfly effect can do. For an example, another example about this that kind of got my mind thinking about how one part of theology can really affect another is that I'm currently writing a book on defending impeccability, which is the idea that Jesus could not sin. But there's a lot of people, even high profile apologists, I know that at some point, I don't know if he's changed his view on this, but at some point, Frank Turek believed that Jesus was peccable or that Jesus could sin. And the effect you see from that on all of theology is very, very destructive. At first, it just seems like an innocent claim. Oh, yeah, of course Jesus could sin. He was human. Yeah, and then you don't realize how big of an effect that has on all the rest of theology and how that literally results in things like an epistemological collapse in some aspects of a lot of things. I was just now writing today on how we could not call God or Jesus Christ as the logos, the ultimate grounding and source of rationality and reason and things like logic, if Jesus is peccable, right? You wouldn't think at first that saying Jesus can sin would affect that, but it does. And I'm sure you wouldn't think at first by this claiming or being part of the church that claims that Muslims and Christians worship the same God, that it would in the future lead to you possibly saying something like, oh yeah, Muslims accept the gospel or have the gospel. That's crazy. I think I've said enough about that though. Let's go ahead and move on to the next clip.
So, Dr. Craig, we got a $1 million question for you that everyone on the internet has been asking lately. Are you ready for this one?
Oh
This has been
no.
a huge
I
internet
already know
drama
what it's
thing.
gonna be.
Do Muslims and Christians worship the same God?
I think that the question is malformed. What I think is that Allah and Yahweh in the Bible do not refer to the same God. They have different attributes.
Yeah.
In particular, I think that Allah is a morally defective being
Yeah.
and therefore not a maximally great being. So I think that the referent of these terms is different. And in that sense, not the same God.
Well said. I completely agree with everything you said there.
Yeah, so I just wanted to play that really quick. I think that's a really good answer to this whole debate in a very short, summarized way. I know last video I didn't really get into my views exactly too much, and I'm more focused on the things of this entire debate that are going to shine a very bad light on Christianity. And I did get more into my views in this video. And maybe that's not a good idea. It probably isn't, but there's some things that this is just getting out of hand. And about that, I do have one more thing to say, and it's not an opinion. I think this is pretty much a fact at this point. This all is causing Christianity to become a laughing stock again. And here's what I mean by that. Think of the times of New Atheism. I was very young at that time, but I remember some of these sayings and stuff that came out of New Atheism, and I also could see the effects of it now by reading some books, reading The God Delusion, and seeing what kind of things were up. Going back and watching debates and interviews with some of the new atheists, the four horsemen of atheism, New Atheism, you could say. And what I have found is that this entire thing is kind of making Christianity a laughingstock again, because people are able to point and say, look how divided they are, man. They're arguing about something as silly about whether or not Muslims and Christians worship the same God. Like, the problem is we are shedding a very bad light again on Christianity. What we need to do here is forget about this and focus again, as I said in the beginning of the video, on positing Christianity as the one true faith, like it is, as Yahweh as the one true God, as He is, and to dispel these false religions like Islam for the dangers that they are. We need to lay down our arms, forget about this debate. No, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that this is not a very important topic that should be discussed, because it is. I think that the question is ridiculous, and as I just said, I think it has some very far-reaching consequences for those who hold to this type of theology, and it's not okay. It's going to cause very big issues. However, at the same time, I can also realize when things just aren't going to change, and when somebody is so held to their view that they're not going to be willing to change, and at that point, it's just worth leaving it behind and focusing on what is ahead, and that is to spread the gospel, to spread the words of Jesus, and spread the fact that Jesus is God and the one true God at that. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope that this video was entertaining. Sorry if I rambled too much. Please give me any feedback on the way I present myself in these videos, the way the equipment, camera quality, anything. Let me know any feedback so I can really get better at honing these things in. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that it was interesting. Please let me know your comments down below. Leave a like, subscribe if you would like. And with that, thank you guys for watching, and have a very blessed day.